My name's Zio, and I realize this is pretty far removed from what I normally cover on here, but since this man has been such an influential figure in so many lives throughout this community and others, I had to weigh in here. The name Akira Toriyama has been on the lips of many worldwide since the announcement of his passing Thursday evening. So apparently this happened on March 1st, but the news didn't break until the other day. There's been no shortage of tributes here on YouTube and other social media platforms like Twitter. Even the Smurfs Instagram got in on it. Of course, I'm not going to recap what happened to the guy, as it's already been done thousands of times over just within the past 36 hours. This is more of a personal tale. So I was actually streaming the other night when I found out about it. I peeked over at Twitter real quick, and all of a sudden I see a post from Dragon Ball Official saying that he had passed away. My heart just immediately sank. So after I saw that, I was like, do I say something? Do I ignore it? Is someone else gonna bring it up? I knew I couldn't dwell on that for too long, so I snuck in a little musical tribute while I made the announcement. What happened after that, though, in-game and in stream chat, was a very beautiful, organic moment. So how did I first come across this guy's work without even knowing his name? So it was around the fall of 1990, and my family and I were living in California, and my dad was an aircraft mechanic for the Air Force. Being a military family always meant the possibility of having to move abroad. Well, that summer my dad got his PCS orders to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan. So Nintendo Power was running a campaign at the time where you got a free copy of Dragon Warrior with a subscription to their magazine. It was like, oh shit, a free Nintendo game with a magazine subscription? Alright, bet. Of course not in those exact words, but that was more or less the sentiment. Games were upwards of $40 to $50 a pop back then, even more if they had a save battery. $40 in 1990 is worth about $100 in 2024. So it came out in 1989, about 3 years after its initial release in Japan, and I guess Nintendo grossly overestimated how well it would do, so they needed to move a bunch of unsold copies. So the game finally arrived after several weeks, and we were already packed out of our house and in temporary housing. Around that time, my dad had been sent to some training program for 3 months. That was my first RPG. I didn't know what to make of it at first. I just liked walking around and killing whatever monsters showed up. Tween Zio at the time was more into the usual Mario, Mega Man, Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, and to a lesser extent, Zelda. It did make an impression on me. That would lead me to Final Fantasy and eventually Phantasy Star. So that's why you're hearing Dragon Quest music right now. So where does Dragon Ball fit in? Well, that story is very different from what most of you might have experienced. So early that next year, we make the move to Okinawa, we get situated in our base housing, my sister and I get situated in school, this, that, and the third. I keep hearing about this Dragon Ball that all my classmates are buzzing about, and I'm like, what's Dragon Ball? Is that like some kind of sport over here? Of course, I had just moved there, and I knew next to nothing about Okinawa or Japan outside of stories my grandpa would tell me, and he didn't have too many nice things to say about the Japanese. He was a Marine that fought during World War II in the Pacific Theater, and he did his fair share of island hopping around that time. That really influenced my perception of the Japanese people. On top of that, we had to take Japanese culture classes at school taught by local Japanese. One of them was centered around the history of Japan, plus some basic language. The other one was more centered around modern Japanese life with a heavier emphasis on language. I didn't really give a shit at the time. I was like, nah, I'm just here because I have to be. It also didn't help that the way that those two women pronounced my real name because their accent absolutely bugged the shit out of me. One of them was a short and stumpy older woman who had to be pushing 50 at the time named Mrs. Kawabata, and we usually called her Ms. Kawabunga. I don't think anyone called her that to her face though, but she was pretty chill. But I digress. Back to Dragon Ball. So I asked one of my classmates one day and he tells me that, oh yeah, it's this TV show with these Japanese characters and they fight and stuff. He shows me some of his Dragon Ball trading cards, and obviously I couldn't read Japanese at the time, but I thought the artwork on them was really cool. I had seen the trading cards before I'd actually sat down to watch the show. So that weekend, my family and I go to one of the local stores off base, and I find some of those Dragon Ball cards, and my parents buy me a couple packs of them. Something about the artwork really spoke to me at the time. Of course, I didn't put 2 and 2 together that it was drawn by the same guy who did the illustrations for Dragon Warrior. So I bring my cards to school that week and show my classmate, and then he goes and tells another classmate of ours, he's like, hey, Zio's real name just got his first set of Dragon Ball cards. And then he'd asked if I had watched the show yet, and I was like, no, not yet. And then he tells me what time and what channel it comes on. Wednesday nights, 7 p.m., Channel 10. So over there, we only had one English-speaking TV channel through AFRTS, the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. All the rest were local Japanese channels, which weren't very many at the time. The channel that aired DBZ over there in Okinawa was called OTV, which I think was an affiliate of the network that aired DBZ on the mainland. Now, this was around the time of the Frieza saga. Goku had already fought Captain Ginyu and was in the healing tank on Frieza's ship. Goku hadn't turned Super Saiyan yet. Frieza hadn't assumed his final form at the time either. The one part that stuck out to me the most at that time was Piccolo fighting against Frieza's third form. This green dude and this monstrous purple alien are just zipping around the sky, punching and kicking each other so fast. It was just so mesmerizing. Then Frieza gets the upper hand and starts pelting Piccolo with energy shots, and he's enjoying this shit too. The whole time, Frieza is just like, and then watching Piccolo's body just dancing around as each energy shot hits his body. And the other characters are just looking on in absolute terror, and the music further accentuates this. And this was a cartoon that aired on evening prime time. This was nothing at all like the shows that we had in the States at the time. On top of that, it followed an overarching story, which a lot of US cartoons did not do. Shows like that in the West were mostly episodic. Of course, I didn't speak a lick of Japanese at the time, so it was hard to really get invested in the show or any of its characters. I'd watch it here and there over the ensuing years until it wrapped up whenever I remembered. Of course, I watched it in English several years later when it came to Toonami like everyone else. Eventually, I'd go on to watch Dragon Ball Kai when that came out, and then Dragon Ball Super, and then OG Dragon Ball, and then finally just recently watched GT in its entirety. So yeah, if not for discovering Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest, and then Dragon Ball, and then Chrono Trigger, I don't think I would be here. Those things really helped me overcome my prejudice back in the day. So what do you guys think? What are some of your favorite Toriyama, Dragon Quest, Dragon Ball, Chrono Trigger moments? You know how much I love chopping it up with you guys in the comment section and on the streams. I hope you have a blessed day. And once again, thank you, Toriyama Sensei. And remember, to thine own self be true. Until next time, farewell.